Our first speaker this afternoon is Maya Enderman. Maya is the Director of U.S. Programs at Natal, which is Israel's Trauma and Resiliency Center. This is a nonprofit organization that provides psychological support to victims of trauma caused by terror and war. She herself served in Israel's defense forces during one of the most traumatic periods of terrorist attacks on civilian populations in Israel. Maya participates in educational efforts and public awareness initiatives to destigmatize trauma and promote the awareness of the need to treat, seek help, and build resiliency. So without further ado, Maya.
Thank you, Jeff. Perfect introduction. Here we go. Thank you for having me here today. Some context. Israel, a small country on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. We declared our independence in 1948, shortly after World War II. At the time, the sentiment was amongst our new citizens that we will do our best to make this our home. And that's what Israelis have done for the past 70 years. Today, on the one hand, Israel is at the forefront of technology and medicine, an amazing country with beautiful beaches, wonderful cuisine. But on the other hand, it is also located in a very, very tough neighborhood. And to date, we have endured 7 major wars, countless terror attacks, and a continuous low-intensity conflict environment. At age 18, we are all required to enlist into the military. Men serve a minimum of 3 years, women 2. Once we complete our active duty, a large portion of our soldiers are required to stay on as military reservists till they're retired around age 40 to 50. Our reservist units are critical in times of war and are there to provide the needed operational support for our active duty personnel. Men more than women continue to train and serve whenever needed, with a requirement of over 30 days a year of reserve duty. With 70% of our civilian population 70% of our population being veterans, the boundary between civilian life and military is quite narrow. Our research shows that 15% of Israeli vets suffer from PTSD symptoms, and many are unable to connect between the event, the traumatic experience, and what it is that they're suffering. How does Natal come into this story? Natal opened its doors 21 years ago. Back then, there was no NGO serving our country, our population. No one was serving our people that were suffering from trauma that stems from terror and war. The government was doing the best that it could, and our military was doing the best that they could for our veteran population. But by 1998, following 5 intensive decades of countless terror attacks and 6 wars, many veterans, civilians, and their families were paying the toll of living in our reality. Many amongst us looked physically fine, but inside were shattered. With that notion, Natal opened its doors to serve all Israelis suffering from trauma, to provide services in the 5 major languages spoken in Israel: Hebrew, Arabic, Amharic, English, and Russian. We work in partnerships today with many NGOs, local municipalities, our security forces, as well as governmental bodies. And lastly, Natal is a place that a veteran doesn't have to go through another battle to prove that he or she are in need of help. 20 years in the making, Natal is has a multidisciplinary approach, incorporating comprehensive model of treatment, prevention, public awareness, and research. Our programming focuses on continuity of care, from Natal's helpline, which receives thousands of calls during emergencies, to our long-term support over the phone during calm during routine. Our clinical unit serves all Israelis across the country. For those who are too reluctant to seek help and are afraid to leave the home, we come into the house and treat them through our mobile unit. And much of the work today is actually dedicated to our resiliency programs, training our at-risk communities, from our youth to our first responders. One of the most important components of our work is actually the public advocacy piece, because no matter how good our programs will be, people will not seek help if the stigma is high. And in Israel, especially in 1998, it was very high. The research indicated that our service members are in need of our help, but with all honesty, the phones didn't ring much first 2 years. And our veterans who needed us the most didn't pick up the phone to seek support. So that was really day one from us. We knew from the get-go that we have to be present and create the visibility for the transparent wounds of war and help remove all the barriers. And what were they? Shame, a disconnect, as I mentioned. Those who came back from war intact felt guilty to come forward and seek help. For the past 21 years, we have worked continuously to destigmatize PTSD and promote national dialogue, to normalize, to legitimize. Our public advocacy task is to be able to bring and embed the message to those who need our help the most and move them to act. With 4 major media campaigns a year on the radio, social media, TV, you will find us on billboards, in pubs, on postcards, in restrooms where the young people are, following episodes of Homeland, and in colleges where most of our veterans do go following their military. We will be there, reaching out for them to act and seek help. We get many calls to Natal's helpline from people who say, I wrote down your number 6 months ago when I was in the car, but I was not ready to call till today. I actually want to show you a quick video to illustrate some of the work that we do and the way that we try to portray the message. Thank you.
It doesn't have to stay with you forever. Call Natal at 1-800-363-363 or visit our website and speak with us now.
There was supposed to be sound, but it's not there. Next time. And we always strive to make sure that we address the veterans and his or her family and the surrounding circles, whether it's innovative running groups or video therapy. We work with the veterans' families, with the parents, with the spouses, with the siblings. We make sure that all the circles of vulnerability are taken care of. And as I mentioned, a lot of media campaigns and reaching out and saying it's okay. Can we do one more video? Hopefully we can hear it. Thank you.
Hey, babe. How was your day?
Fine.
Thank you. So some studies that we've conducted in recent years to see if there was an impact, and for us, we always check, first of all, to see if we're effective. So when we opened our doors, as I mentioned, especially the veterans, especially the men, didn't pick up the phone. So 35% of men picked up the phone to seek help, and 65% of the women. By 2017, it didn't flip, but it went higher. 54% of men call Natal, and 46% are women. And the other piece to this is that today Natal is a household name. 65% of households in Israel are aware of Natal and work. So if there is an emergency, for example, one of the other things that we always do is we make sure that there's a scroll in every major media for people to call in. And that's why we probably get thousands and thousands of calls during emergencies. Just in April, we had 48 hours of 700 rockets falling on the south of the country. That brought 2,000 calls within a week. And that's what we're here to do. Out of those 2,000 calls of emergency of people that were under stress, 300 of those people were then moved into the clinical care unit, which is set across the country, just to show the ratio. So thankfully, we've been able to create a cultural change, and people seek help. I would like to dedicate the rest of the discussion to the proactive approach of resiliency building for operational units and our first responders. The phrase resilience, as we all know, is receiving more and more attention. Why do some people bounce back from tragic events more than others? What are our breaking points? Can we identify them ahead of time? In the past 15 years, I've witnessed a conceptual shift. I want to share with you what we've learned in Israel and how we moved from a reactive to a proactive mode, and how this paradigm shift of being there the day before has empowered our first responders in Israel and in other parts of the world. The first paradigm shift that we understood was that we can't wait any longer for our first responders to be hit by the big traumatic event. And like any other training they receive, resiliency training should be part of their practice. And the second thing we understand today is that stress does not only come from our acute exposure to a major incident, but also the exposure to many small incidents over time, which has now been called accumulative PTSD. Being exposed to human tragedy, witnessing horrific scenes involving children, threat to your own life, coupled with a lack of support from leadership and the don't talk about it culture, can be as debilitating, as harmful as the exposure to the big event. And that takes its toll. Which brings me back to the paradigm shift. How do we help our soldiers? How do we help our first responders to put the seatbelt on before the accident? For us, it was OSM, Operational Stress Management. The training is based on the following 3 pillars. First, the training focuses on the operational core mission of the unit rather than the individual. Second, the training has to be experiential, understanding that soldiers, first responders, prefer to work in the field, not at their desk. The training has to be experiential rather than death by PowerPoint. And the third pillar is the practical application. If we can apply the tools during routine, like any other skill set, if I can incorporate the toolbox into my daily operational cycle during routine, I will know how to use it during an emergency. For example, How can we help a platoon sergeant incorporate this capability into an operational cycle? After returning from patrol with the unit, we know that they need to refuel, organize the gear, but after an incident occurs, we also need to provide a technique to distress before sending the unit back out. I want to share with you very briefly our work with Israel's police. About 6 years ago, we were asked by Israel's police leadership to come in and work with them. At the time, what they shared with us was that they were witnessing in some of the operational units poor work performance, substantial increase in undiagnosed sick days, as well as low morale. So working hand in hand with the different units' leadership and some of the team members, we learned about the unit's culture, history, and tailored the trainings to fit their needs. For example, undercover units who work around the clock, the core issue identified was constant hyper-alertness. By carefully mentoring the commanding officers and the team leaders, we introduced a structured operational mental debrief technique. For accident investigations who are exposed daily to accident scenes, we have constructed and provided a mental health toolkit that helps them prepare mentally and emotionally before arriving at the scene. This helps them concentrate on the professional side of part of the work, collecting the evidence, forensics aspects, on a small but effective ritual of self-care as they unwind and download back to the office or home. What did we see? First, we saw cultural change. Commanders were seeing, acknowledging the situation as well as intervening if the officers were in trouble. We started witnessing a reduction in absence from workplace, and officers were not just showing up, but they were really showing up. We also saw openness to seeking help. Employee Assistance Program reported an increase of 33% of officers reach in year 1 and year 2. And the EAP staffing had to go up 100%. Year 1, we were asked to come in and conduct 250 workshops with Israel's police. By year 2, we were at 800 workshops a year. It's been, the past 6 years have been quite busy with 22,000 first responders trained, and out of that number, 18,000 of them are from law enforcement. And most recently, we've been called upon to bring the know-how to New Jersey's first responder through the Urban Area Security Initiative. We're in year 2 of operations, and we hope to have some impact stats soon. One of the strongest statements I heard from a very, very tough firefighter at the end of one of the trainings was the following. He was very quiet at the end. Thank you. And he just came out at the end and he said, if I've taken this program 20 years ago, my life would have been very different. And for a proud firefighter fighting the fight and the fires for so many years, and that was his statement, was very profound. And which brings me to my very last point. 20 years ago, in a macho culture where the people are the military, seeking psychological help was taboo and deemed as a weakness in our country. In 2016, retired IDF Chief of General Staff Benjamin Gantz became the chairman of Natal's Public Advisory Board. When he spoke at the residence of Israel's president, marking Natal's 20th anniversary, he said that he is thankful for Natal for making sure that the wounded are not left alone and for supporting them in their journey back to life. I think this sentiment speaks volume where a chief, of staff comes forward and says that this is so needed and this is what our country needs, and he stands behind such a cause and joins in. So thank you.